the name
Assalamu
of
alaikum warahmatullah.
Allah. Bismillah. Bismillah. Have you ever considered being a Muslim TV presenter for kids? Because I have.
Oh, okay. Thought you were gonna say like a munshid or something. TV presenter. You know
Kids.
what? Like maybe 1%. Maybe 1%.
Really? You know, I always say, oh, there's a market for it. But the moment you search that stuff, you realize the market is quite flooded. You just you're not exposed to it because it's not the content you look for. But if you start looking, it's out there.
You know that brother, I don't know his full name, but his name's Faruk. He's like a convert. He's a presenter, I think a kids TV presenter, maybe British Muslim TV, maybe. But he's probably not doing that anymore. I think he's a student at Medina now. So I used to live near a masjid and attend a masjid, and was it once a week or maybe more than that? He would come with a certain sheikh who would teach a class there. So I would usually attend that class, and he was always with the sheikh.
Yeah.
So I got to know him a little bit, and I know that he did that. And then when I say 1%, I thought of doing it. It's not very me, to be honest, but it's like, okay, Muslim. And, there was a time in my life where I was into like slam poetry and stuff.
Ooh.
So it was kind of like performance and stuff like that. So I don't know, I just thought I could work in a Muslim environment and this and that. But I didn't really pursue it whatsoever, I would say.
Well, could have been. How many
I think
paths
it suits you
maybe
more
I've
than me,
taken?
for sure.
Yeah, do you think so? I'm making a fool of myself here. That's fit me, doesn't it?
No. I feel like you're more of a kids person, that's what I'll say.
Possibly. You just, I'll never forget when you were speaking about your kids and you're like, my son will come up to me and he'll show me something he's built. And if you were like, I won't even phrase it, I'd just say, okay. I find that still funny. I still think about that every day.
I think that was the episode. I had recently read that book, Punished by Rewards. Yeah. So I think that was the influence of that book.
Oh, there you go.
I don't think I do that anymore. I think what I do now is I try to praise the like effort rather than the characteristic or the outcome. So it's like, you built that thing. I won't praise the thing they built. I'll praise the effort they put in, or the plan, or that type of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
What it took to get there. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Bismillah. Wow. Guess what? We got a topic today. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, although we skirt around it and touch on it a long time.
Yeah.
Many times.
I'll tell you what the trap is of this topic.
Go for it.
The trap is that we end up talking about hijrah. Okay, so we have to be aware of that and avoid that actively.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we can just focus on living in the UK or living in the West in general, but it does pose a question about going to, moving to a Muslim country or the Arab world, because there is an element.
Yeah, I just mean I don't want the episode shouldn't get hijacked by it, but of course that's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
firstly, bro, like the topic I understand is basically like identity, right? But specifically for a certain experience that people live in the West, etc. Muslims live in the West. I just wanted to start off by saying, like, identity. I remember I attended a slam. I mentioned slam poetry just 2 minutes ago. I'll mention it again. I attended a slam poetry workshop. Okay. And it was, I don't know how to describe it other than gay. It was quite gay, but it was cool. Okay.
It's cool.
So the guy was like, the guy hosting the workshop, he's, pretty, he's professional, right? So he does poetry full time. He does performances and stuff. And he said, he had this prompt for us that we had to write to. So he said, where are you from? It's like a question where people want you to answer in one word.
Yep.
But he said, how could you reduce where you're from to a place or a country name or a city name? He said, where you're from is all your experiences in life, right? I'm from this mother and this father and this, games I used to play growing up and this travels that I've done, and this is where I'm really from.
Yeah.
So identity is very multifaceted. but there's always that element of what you label yourself with, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of this thought is so the kind of the crux of it is feeling nowhere feels like home, right?
Yeah.
But the reason it's interested me is because diaspora in general, and it doesn't have to be just Muslims, but they are going through turbulent times in relation to anti-immigrant sentiments, both in the West and in the Muslim world. In Turkey is a good example. That's where you are. We spoke about that at length. And in the UK and America, etc. I mean, America, you can see that. We can't really speak on America, but there's elements there we can borrow. But UK definitely, with the rise of Reform as a political party, and their narrative is very focused on anti-immigration policies, so much so that they've won seats, and also Labour and Conservative are kind of borrowing elements from their talking points just to kind of capture that kind of audience, so the Stop the Boats movement. And what was Keir Starmer's recent debacle? He said something along the lines of, "Oh, we're becoming an island of strangers," in the notion that there's so many of these ethnic minority communities, I suppose, that are broken off, and enclaves of individuals that are very separate from the wider society, that are not very inclusive or don't integrate. These are all keywords we're throwing out. And the gut feeling of many Muslims that I see on Twitter, or the discourse around this, is like, "Oh, that's horrible, that's bad, how dare they push back." And some of this discussion, I kind of want to just play devil's advocate a little bit, even though it's a bit naughty, bro. It's a bit spicy doing that. But I want to, just because I'm not saying that they're 100% true about everything they say, but there are some things. It's a phenomenon that is worth delving deeper into, because if you don't feel like home, which many Muslims, or many, doesn't have to even be Muslims, forget even using Muslims at this point, but anyone who's got this dual nationality, this kind of, "Oh, my parents are from such and such," how at home do you feel in the UK? How at home do you feel in Turkey as a non-Turk? How at home do you feel in these places that you're not necessarily from? And combined with that is, how at home do you feel when you go, quote unquote, like home? And do you really have one? So what does home mean to me? And I'll ask you in a second. But home is somewhere I cherish, somewhere I want the best for, somewhere that is recognizable, and I feel safe and secure and comfortable. These are just keywords that come into my head at home. And then somewhere that isn't home is the opposite kind of those things. And how much do you respect your house and look after your house, and how much do you look after and put effort and energy into somewhere that isn't necessarily your house? But what about you? How does that idea of home and an actual location geographically feel to you, considering especially how diverse your history is of where you've lived and where you're from?
Yeah. I don't actually think I can define home, because how do I know? Like, obviously, when we use a word, generally everyone has the same conception of the word, right? If we're speaking the same language. I probably, even if I was to talk about home, the concept of home, I wouldn't have the same idea of it as someone who's even yourself, even though you did live in Tunisia, but you live 90% of your life in one place, right? I don't have that. I don't know what that means, bro. I really don't know what it means. So if someone was to say, "This feels like home," I don't know what that means. I don't if I was to, let's say now I live in Turkey for the next 30 years, how will I know when I'm starting to feel like it's home? I don't know, right? I could guess, I could guess based on, for example, the description you just gave.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the closest you could say I would have got to home is the UAE, because I spent the most time there, perhaps. And the UAE was very familiar. I'm talking about probably 21 years, I think. I think I spent 21 years in the UK, in the UAE.
Yeah.
I spent 21 years in the UAE, so very familiar, right? But how can UAE be home?
Yeah, exactly.
How could that be home? It can't really be home, because during those 21 years, I was always not sure how long more I was going to be there. Another interesting element was that the people that I know there were often changing. So there was a conveyor belt of people. Every 2, 3 years, people would leave, new people would come. So the familiarity is a bit different because, yes, you know the landmarks and the places, but the people change. And the people, I think, is quite a big factor in familiarity and stuff and feeling at home. So, yeah, the UAE would be the closest for me. But now I've left the UAE, I may never go to the UAE ever again.
Yeah.
So how is that home now? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
weird, right? But
I mean, from an outside perspective, obviously never really, I went to the UAE to visit a long time ago, but I wasn't old enough to remember much of it. But it doesn't come across as a place that would be home to anyone but those who are born and, have that nationality, and that's them. But even then, large parts of the UAE still doesn't probably feel like home to those that are from the UAE. Like Dubai probably feels very, it's like going to a
you think
tourist
so?
spot in let's say you're in Algeria, going to, oh, I don't have tourist spots in Algeria in terms of tourist spots for foreigners, but
That's true.
Tunisia certainly has like, oh, this is like a really
Yeah.
bourgeoisie tourist area. It's not home to me. The shabby area is probably home to me, and very few people grow up in those like closed off, swimming pool and only bikinis allowed in this pool and that kind of nonsense, right? But yeah, so I was just wondering, like,
But that, by the way, just to
go on.
correct you on that, there are definitely Emiratis would definitely feel at home in UAE,
Really?
and there are neighborhoods in Dubai even. Obviously, like, I mean, maybe it's not obvious, but in Dubai, because that's maybe the area, the place people would think there isn't that kind of home element. Or what.
Yeah.
There are neighborhoods that are purely Emirati villa kind of neighborhoods, not necessarily tourist attractions there. Mostly large houses. Sometimes they have these walled off compounds where they have 2, 3, 4 houses, all from the same family, sharing the same kind of thing. But those neighbors would be like Jumeirah is one. Jumeirah is on the beach, and it's one of the first areas that was built up in Dubai. And it's like an old Emirati neighborhood where a lot of Emiratis have been living there for generations. You also would have, this is maybe a more recent neighborhood. When I say recent, I mean like 20 years.
Yeah.
The neighborhood, damn, what do they call that? Like near the Shiba and stuff.
Okay.
So I'm just want to give some real
That's
names
fine, yeah.
because there are neighborhoods where you would find that. Even there's a very nice masjid not too far from like Dubai Mall. Okay. So it's close to Dubai Mall. It's close to Dubai, to Burj Khalifa, but it's 5-10 minutes drive, and you're in this neighborhood that's only Emirati villas. And there's a really nice masjid there as well. I used to sometimes go there, like when I'm at the mall and I'm like maybe on my way home or something, I might stop and pray at that masjid. And you go to that masjid, it's like only Emiratis there. And it's like an Emirati neighborhood. So the people that grow up, that's their growing up, right? Like
Yeah.
when they could leave the neighborhood and stuff, but I would imagine, yeah, they definitely have a sense of home, and they have familiarity in terms of the people they know, because they do have very strong family ties and stuff. And then they have like certain traditions that they all share, like on the weekend or during holidays, a lot of them will go to the farm.
Yeah.
So their family or tribe will have a farm, and they, for some reason, they love going.
Yeah.
The farms are in the desert,
Yeah.
bro. They go to the farm, and there's their camels. They just love their camels.
Well-
They love spending time with their camels,
Yeah.
and that's something they all have in common. They share that and stuff. You went to school and you studied English, science, you studied maths. Then you went to university, studied engineering, economics, maybe computer science. But where along the line do you ever learn about how to be a man of character, how to be a man that takes action, how to have a resilient mindset, and to build yourself to become a man that you're proud of, especially the Islamic way? Because there are a lot of men, when they want to learn how should a man act in this situation, especially in 2025, they will either end up going left side to the feminism or right side to the red pill. Well, I wrote a book specifically that cuts through both of those, and it just goes to the source, to Islam, to show you how to be a man of character according to Islam. I've got a free chapter for you in the description. Click that link, check it out, and if you like it, you can get the whole book.
I think when I perceive like the home element, the reason maybe I have that kind of assumption of Emiratis or the UAE is probably because my understanding of home is very much kind of what you said there about their tribes and the lineage and the heritage being able to be viewed and seen and elements of that. But arguably that might be a bit difficult for like a semi-nomadic history where you never really were in one place all the time. But like when I go back to Tunisia, I'm told, okay, your granddad lived in this house. Oh, and his dad lived here, and his dad lived there, and then all these people are your relatives, etc. And this kind of area or locale that I live in hasn't developed much, so it's very much frozen in time. And the same goes for
the way it was.
The same for my mother's side of the family. She, in fact, despite the fact that my granddad from my mother's side was built apartments and stuff in Lareish, which is a fishing town and quite developing at the moment. There's a more smaller village where he was actually from, and that's actually where they spend most of their time now because they've kind of gone back there, fixed the old house, and that's where they want to spend 90% of the time. So it's like that is their going back home, and so there's that element of like recognizable heritage that makes you feel like you've kind of returned to where you're from. And I wonder how much in like a developing society, like a rapidly developing society, such as the UAE or such as, and the other places, is that recognizable kind of elements. But one thing I wanted to ask you is like the psychological weight of you not having that idea of home. Is that something you experience? Do you feel like you're missing out on anything at all by not having a place you can call home, I guess?
100%.
Yeah.
I think about it quite a lot, and I'm glad that you wanted to cover this topic because I've actually been thinking about it a lot over the last 2 weeks, because it factors in my decision of where I live and where I will live and stuff like that. But so I fit into the category of what they call third culture kids, which is people who were raised when they were children. They had parents from one place, they lived in another place, and then although they lived in that country, they were in like a bubble in that country, like in not the mainstream society, if you like, right? So for example, for me, I'm fourth culture kid maybe because I have parents from 2 different places. But like my dad is Algerian, my mom is Irish British, so that's 2. Then I lived in UAE, but I wasn't living in UAE with Emiratis. I was living in a subculture of UAE, which is like non-Emiratis. Similar to this, there are, for example, children of diplomats. Let's say they're a diplomat for whatever, China. Their fathers are ambassador or something. So their parents are from China. They might live in, I don't know, Nigeria. But then in Nigeria, they mix with all the ambassadors' kids, for example, in the subculture, not with the mainstream Nigerians. So they've got this mixture of 3 cultures. So that's 100%. I fit into that kind of category, and it's well known and documented the downsides of this. The positives is they call it like you could be a cultural chameleon. You're extremely adept at adapting to different cultures. You're very aware of the differences between cultures and the nuances. You can kind of respect people's cultures no matter where you go because you understand that people are different in different places. But then there's downsides. There's downsides, which is like you don't know. You might not. You don't have an identity, I suppose. You don't have a clear-cut identity. Okay, so that's one thing. You don't have a clear-cut identity. The other thing is that because you don't have a clear-cut identity, I think it hits your confidence when you can't just say clearly, like with your chest, I'm from this place. Because like I've got a friend, he's like Irish convert, and his wife is Somali, and his kids look a lot more Somali than Irish. Okay. Yeah. Whenever people ask them, where are you from? They say Irish because they're like, oh, my dad's Irish. So I say I'm Irish. But nobody takes that seriously. So they know that like subconsciously, they know people don't take that seriously. So they probably would say I'm Irish with a bit of a hesitation in their voice, if you know what I mean. Likewise, if I say I'm Algerian or if I say I'm Irish, I know deep down I can't like back that up fully, So they might say, oh, where are you from in Ireland? I don't know, man. Like, I don't really know too much about that side of my family. So you lack identity. you lack confidence, I think, a lot of the time because of that. And yeah, because you lack confidence, I think that affects literally your whole life, your decisions and your this and that. And you have a lot of instability in your life, a lot of question marks in terms of, well, if you just don't know where home is. So a lot of people, let's say a lot of Indians go to UAE a lot, right? But they always know we're going to go home because they just were in India, they went to UAE for a certain reason, and now going back home. For me, I don't really have that, right? Or for third culture kids, they don't have, okay, one day we'll go home, or I'll retire home, or I want to raise my kids home. There is no home. And so another negative thing is that, and I suppose this is specific to those who have pretty strong passports and stuff, is that you're always looking for the better place to live. You're always on a search of, yeah, maybe that country would be better. I'm in this country, but it has these negatives. I'll just pick up and leave to that country.
Yeah,
so you're so mobile because you're so comfortable with moving countries, but that leaves this constant instability in your life that you don't commit as well. That's probably a downside as well. You've got this fear of commitment to things because your life story is that there's no such thing as long term, right?
Yeah. You can escape when things get
can
hard.
move. You can escape, and also sometimes you're forced to leave as well, right? So both of those.
That kind of ties into
these are some of the downsides.
That ties into a good point. Actually, I was going to talk about anyway, but that idea of escape, or when, okay, here's a good example, maybe a bad example actually. Contextually, when Iran was striking Israel, a lot of Israelis left because it's not really home to a lot of them, and that was
a convenient place.
That was escape in action. It's like, we love this country, we want Zionism, we want to expand Israel, but the moment the going gets tough, we're hopping on a boat to Cyprus. So there's that element, right? And the reason I use Israel as an example is it's such a new society with very fake heritage. They talk about culture that is all stolen and everything is very wishy-washy. Israeli culture, what even is that? It's all borrowed bits and pieces, an amalgamation of the
Israeli
Jews from all over the world that also kind of appropriate Palestinian culture, etc. But it's a very fascinating look into that in action, a very quick scale. But what that leads me into thinking is, if nowhere is home, and when the going gets tough, you want to escape, then do we, as Muslims, for example, in the UK or anywhere really, do we neglect local communities and the local kind of our locale? Do we neglect it because we don't feel like it's ours? And part of that is just putting to the side the halal and haram of voting, for example. Voting so a lot of people would say it's haram to vote in a democratic election. But do you care enough, if you could, or if you believe it's permissible, do you care enough about the future of a country that you don't really feel like is home? Do you care enough about, what's going on locally that doesn't necessarily directly affect you, but does affect the wider community? There's, this thing going on. Do you support it? There's this charity going on. There's this initiative going on. There's a beach cleanup. We have the beach down here. There's a beach cleanup, which I've always thought is an amazing, great initiative that is actually done all over the world. I've seen it done in even, Tunisia and stuff. Do you engage in that because you care about this area that you live in? Or is it really that the symptoms of if you go to popular, dense ethnic minority areas in London, Manchester, Birmingham. Yeah, Birmingham was a good example, actually. It was in the news quite a lot. It's these areas look really neglected. Is that because of the poverty in the area? Or is that because of this feeling that the local ethnic minorities don't feel like it's home and they're only there mentally temporarily, despite living all of their lives there? Are they cleaning up after themselves? Do they care about their local area? Does it mean something to them? And I think there's going to be some people in that, group, in our groups, that don't care. They really don't care about where they live, not because they're malicious, but because of this element of I don't feel like it's home here. What are your thoughts on that kind of element? Because there is going to be narratives against diaspora revolving that sentiment. Look at these foreigners, they don't care, they do this, they do that, they rinse the system, they're very dirty, they don't clean up after themselves, blah 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 blah. some of that is going to stem from a reality of not feeling like it's their home, and some of that is obviously overblown propaganda against, immigrants or whatever.
Yeah, I think there's few layers to that whole thing, right? So like, one layer is, this is actually, by the way, even true for Algeria. I remember someone said this. I heard somebody say this, and I couldn't unhear it. He said that, I think the way he worded it was, the government or the deep state or whatever in Algeria, they've convinced you that this is their country and you're just living in their country. And because of that, you don't clean up the streets and you don't do the beach cleans and this and that. Right?
Okay.
Because you're like, and I understand where that comes from, because if it's like, okay, it's my country, I'm born, raised here, my father's from here, grandfather, great grandfather, etc. is from here, right? I pay my taxes, do my work, whatever, here. And then when I want something like, which is my right, like, I don't know, title deed for my land or this and that, and I need to do bribery for it, or I do this, or the police are able to cause me issues because of this and this, then it becomes their country in terms of they can control what I can and cannot do. I'm talking about something that's your basic right.
Yeah.
So that kind of could develop that feeling that we're just borrowing this country off them. So I think that same psychology could apply to people whose parents, grandparents, whatever, were immigrants to the UK. It's like, we're here, we got the passport, citizenship, language, this and that, been here for generations. But maybe something like, deep down we know we're a minority, and if it really, really came down to it, they would trade us for prosperity, or they would trade us for harmony, or whatever it is. And so you don't fully, because you have that feeling, probably subconsciously, by the way, you're like, well, it's not my country in that sense. Subconsciously, you're like, it's not my country, so let them fix it, because ultimately it's theirs, if you like. So that's one layer to it. Another layer is, I think it's convenient sometimes for it to not be your country. Then you don't take ownership for any of the negative stuff. You're like, their country, let them fix it up. Right?
Exactly.
I didn't clean up my rubbish, I litter, I drive terribly, I do this and that. But it's their country, they fix it, So it could be a way of palming off responsibility. And the third element I was thinking of, or the third layer to it, is like, maybe it's just like people don't know, because it's a new phenomenon, like Muslims immigrating and living in a non-Muslim society and stuff, and then playing like an active role in it and stuff, contributing to it. It's a new phenomenon, and so you don't have like role models. You don't know what it looks like to be a Muslim in that thing, right? So therefore, by definition, it's like politics, engaging in politics, or being a policeman, or XYZ, that's for them. That's not for us.
So
probably purely out of not seeing examples of it.
So that's interesting, actually, on a few points there you've raised. So the first one I'd say is, the Algeria example you gave. I can't say I agree fully with that idea, only because I feel like North African nationalism is so strong that it's not like, oh, it's their country and I'm living in it. It's more like they've taken it from me and I'm living in it, but I still love Zaire, I still love Tunis, I still love Maghreb. I'm so passionate about it, and it's bloody. Even the ones who leave, it's bloody, but it's hijacked maybe by these authorities. But as opposed to in England, I would never say it's bloody and they've taken it from me. So there's a big distinct difference there.
That is different.
So I think one could feel apathetic, like, they've taken it, what's the point? But I love this place, as opposed to, it's theirs and it's always been theirs, and I'm just like, I don't care about it. I'll take what I can get from it. There's that element. Another element, which you've just touched upon now, I think is important, is the idea of enclaves and the idea of like, not integrating, etc., and how there isn't a precedent for it. And whenever there is an element, I think, of building or developing our communities within the UK, for example, I think we're misinformed in how we do it a lot of the times as diaspora. And I think there is this element of importing this idea of whatever culture is back home into the UK as Islamic culture. You see masajid, for example, some masajid that are built new, it looks like they've just taken a masjid from Pakistan or taken a masjid from Saudi, whatever, and just popped it in the UK. And then there's this whole aversion by the native population, if you want to use that terminology. So, oh, they're building mosques in Devon, or they're building mosques in whatever, in what was the new one, Lake District. That was a big one that where they were all. And I think there is something to be said about that relationship. You know, I had a note here actually. I've lost the note, but it's essentially like how far is too far between, and how do we adjust the way that we engage and we build and do we develop our communities in a way that is less antagonistic to the population that is here and has its own identity in a positive way that isn't necessarily an importation of whatever is this concept of back home.
Yeah.
You know, a good example.
Have you seen any like good examples of that? Have you ever bought something from a shop and then you want to return it? You want to get your money back, but you just keep delaying actually going back to that shop to return it, give the receipt, and get the money back. This is what might be happening if you're procrastinating. You've got something that you can really make a big go at. You can achieve big things in your life, but you keep putting it off until one day it'll be too late. If that's you and you're a Muslim man and you've got big ambitions for your life, but you're not taking action on them, you're procrastinating about it, then check out my YouTube channel, because every single video there is for people like you to help you. So check out the link in the description and you're going to enjoy those videos if that sounds like you.
I'll give you a good example, which I obviously, there's a discussion about it, is like certain masajid that are a good examples ones, are the ones that like take over an old church, for example. They don't knock the church down and then build a masjid, you know, typical masjid with the minaret and the dome and all that stuff. Nothing necessarily wrong with that, but that isn't in line with whatever culture has permeated and existed through, you know, generations in the UK. So there's this idea of using architecture and structure of something familiar to the UK, present in UK heritage, but making it a masjid. And I've seen like stained glass windows in a masjid that remove, you know, the elements of iconography and of drawings of humans and living things, but have the same style. I don't have a picture at the moment. I can't remember what masjid it was. It might be one in Oxford or something like that, that kept that kind of. So a passerby who isn't Muslim would see that and recognize it as, you know, this kind of this doesn't look too averse in the UK. This doesn't look foreign in the UK. This looks like part of UK culture. At the same time, you know, look, Islam, wherever it was, of course, it brought elements of Arabs and Arabia and the language and that culture with it. But the flavor of Islam in different areas of the world, in the Muslim world, is different. You know, Turkish Islam isn't the same as Saudi Islam. And a lot of that is through many factors, of course. But the culture is very different. And it molded the culture into a way that was acceptable in Islam, as opposed to Arabizing the entire, you know, Muslim world as we see it today. So that's why, like, okay, the cultural dress of a Turkish man is mastura, it's modest, etc., because of Islam, but also it's unique, and it's unique to Turkey. Same with Morocco, same with Algeria. You're very similar. You're very similar. It's the region, you know. Go to China, it'll be different. What is that in the UK? Well, the thobes we wear are from Saudi or Morocco or this place or that place. The food we eat is from this place and that place. We are just an amalgamation, and we just scream foreigner a lot of the time. We do. And that's not just because of the way we look. It's just the way we are. And I'm not pointing fingers or blaming, but when you put yourself in the shoes of Barry, my neighbor, who's not my neighbor now, but he wasn't never my neighbor. I'm just giving an example. Barry, my neighbor, for example, who sees all these Muslims coming over and taking over. Yes, you could be a aggressive Muslim and you give, you know, you share food, and we're multicultural and cosmopolitan, etc., etc. But if you were in the middle of Zaire, in your own town in Zaire, and it just suddenly rapidly started changing, and suddenly, Chinese community just moves in, everything around you is changing, and there's Chinese food all over the stores, and there's Chinese kids going to school, and do you still recognize your home? And how would you feel about it? And I know it's controversial to say that, and I'm pushing like this whole, oh, how could you side with them thing? I'm just playing devil's advocate, because how would I
think
feel?
it's even controversial, bro. This is basic empathy.
Yeah, but some people feel like that, don't they? Some people feel like, oh, you're giving them precedent, and we're here.
But no, I think we can empathize, and you might still end up with the same conclusion, but have the ability to empathize at least.
Yeah.
Bro, in my town in Algeria, there's a church, right?
Yeah.
From the French built it. And it's not a church anymore. It's used for like the Beladia or whatever. But I don't even like that there's a church there.
Yeah.
And this from 100 years ago or whatever. Okay. So what if there was a church that's actually being used as a church? I would not be happy.
Right? Yeah.
So I think it's straight up. Actually, my brother's a good person to talk about this, because he deals with so many different people from so many different backgrounds in the UK. And he always has complaints about different people. Like what I mean by that is, you would say he's like, what's this new party? The new right-wing party,
Reform.
Was it?
Reform.
Yeah. You would say he's Reform, okay, the way he speaks. But he's not like that. He's just like, these people, a lot of them, like, he's talking about fresh people from either Romania or Nigeria or whatever. He's like, they're so completely different to Brits in terms of their culture and their mannerisms and the way they interact. They're so different. And when people are very different, they can easily annoy each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, he says the same thing about Algerians. He's like, this thing about Algeria, I just can't stand it. Right. Because he's not like that. But he's like, I fully get it. Like, these ways that these certain people from this certain culture act, it's not compatible. Like, people, of course, people will be mad. Of course, people will be mad. And it's not. But then certain people on the right, or whatever you want to call them, they will now take this and say, that means those cultures are inferior to our culture, and we could, of course, the Western civilization is the best, and it's the most superior, and it's the most ethical and moral, and most advanced and most enlightened. That's not what I'm saying, or that's not what he's saying either. He's saying that it's so different that it's normal. People would get annoyed. I think it's completely normal, completely acceptable. However, bro, people might struggle to empathize, because if you're Muslim, your parents came from Pakistan 2 generations ago, you don't even know Pakistan, okay? So for you to even imagine Pakistan, and then foreigners come to Pakistan and they're kind of switching things up, you probably can't really imagine that, because for you, like, Pakistan probably not even your home. It's not even something that you're like protective of in that sense, and you don't want it to change, right?
Yeah.
So you wouldn't be able to imagine, you wouldn't be able to empathize. You might struggle to empathize in that sense, you know what I mean? But I think you have to. And you were saying how Islam, or the manifestation of Islam in different parts of the world, was always slightly different. I think the further proof of that is that Islam is malleable, if you like, whilst continuing its principles. Is that some of the best citizens, if you like, in the UK are the most religious Muslims. Like, these people really benefit the society around them. If you look at the du'at, if you look at the volunteers and the people active in these kind of things, they're actually like sincerely like good people. We maybe, I don't know if this is statistically significant, but you always hear stories, oh, this woman was being mugged and a Muslim helped her.
Yeah, of course.
This taxi driver, he found 10K left in his thing and he brought it back. So the more religious of a Muslim you are, the better you are in that society, if you like. However, some people, they're like, okay, I get that you're behaving kind of well, but number one, there are a lot of you who are not religious enough, and you're really annoying me. Number two is, even though you're behaving well, I just don't like your foreign beliefs, and your like, I so deeply disagree with, I don't know, women wearing niqab, that I just don't want it. So there's that element as well.
No, absolutely. It is interesting, because how far is too far as well? Like, how far? I'll give you an example. Like, we want our rights. in the UK, don't we? We want our prayer rooms and we want our halal food and we want, some places want adhan out loud and this and that, and sometimes, I'm going to name drop a organization here because I think they walk a fine line, and sometimes I think they step on the wrong side. But Five Pillars, as a news agency, grassroots Muslim news agency, whatever opinion you have about them, whatever, it exists, and they have a goal and a motion in mind. Now, I sometimes see some articles that, I was looking on their website earlier, and it's quite, some of the headlines talking about Sudan and the crisis that's happening there, talking about, geopolitics in general. I can't remember if it was them, the page themselves, or the guys that, the journalists behind it. It was Dilly and another gentleman, I can't remember. They tweeted something once that I thought, oh, you've crossed the line there. You shouldn't have done that. I didn't like that. And it was something along the lines of complaining. It was a picture of like Tesco's, and they were complaining and tagging Tesco's and trying to create a bit of a thing about Tesco's put in the halal section next to maybe it was like next to normal meat or next to the pork or something along those lines. And it was almost like, oh, we're going to cancel Tesco's for this. And I thought, I think you're getting a bit too far there, doing a whole public tweet, rage bait, cancel Tesco's for what they've done here. I think it was something along those lines. Was a little bit over the edge for me. I think, now we're getting into territory of like, we're just going to be those guys that are perpetual victims, and we're going to create an animosity for ourselves for something that may probably, let's err on the side of optimism, may have been an oversight. And actually, there's a clear barrier between your food and their food that we shouldn't really be freaking out and causing an uproar, and we want everything to be perfectly accommodated and catered for us. And I think this is the worry, because when you looked at the replies, because it did go semi-viral at the time, obviously the obvious people under there, we need to ban halal, it's barbaric and you're asking for too much, you're taking over the country, blah 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 blah. Tesco's is a cultural icon. It's a British supermarket, right? So it did kind of like irk me seeing that, because I thought, you're just painting a target on our backs, because how far is too far? There are things within law and within legislation and freedom of religion, all this stuff that we capitalize on, we utilize, as any religion would. But then it's like this thing, like, are we guests? If we see ourselves as guests, are we guests? Should we behave as guests? Should we be polite about our grievances? Or no, we are British, and we want to establish ourselves as Islam in this country. At the same time, it doesn't look British. And what is British? Well, that's another discussion, probably for another day. You see the discourse here. Like, this is one example.
Yeah.
But there are many times where we pop up in the media and we demand a right of some sort that we could have probably just done without for a while, or been a bit more subtle about it instead of trying to wrap up cancel culture around it.
Yeah.
I
think that this is what it means to be part of a community, is that you can't control what everyone says and does and thinks, and you won't always agree with each other, but then at the same time you kind of represent each other, right? So I mean, I agree with you. I think I'm actually would be more against it than even what you expressed, because Tesco is a private company. They don't even have to sell halal food. They don't have to sell meat at all. They could say, we're going vegetarian, we're not selling any meat. They do what they want, right? Whatever they think will make them money, right? As long as it is in line with the law, they'll do what they want. So they've decided they want to it makes sense for them to sell halal. If you don't like the fact that it's next to the other meat or whatever, surely you just request. You just request, go to the manager or send an email or something.
Yeah.
And just say request. And it's like, is this like systematic across all the branches, or is it just one specific branch? And you just request it. Like, it's not a big deal, man. But I agree with you. I think this is the thing, like prioritization of what's actually important. Like, honestly, even if Tesco stops selling halal meat, even if it's because they think it's morally wrong or whatever, like, so what? Go to, Uncle Ahmed's place and buy your meat from there. Like, it's not a big deal. We're talking about buying food, bro.
Yeah,
I think there are much more important, pressing things, much more important, Yani,
yeah,
So, yeah. But again, this is the thing. Some people, their priorities are informed by like the Quran and Sunnah and the principles that are derived from that. And some people are more just like, I guess the priorities is a mixture of
yeah.
Quran and Sunnah and stuff, and then their desires,
I,
So, yeah.
I may have mixed up my example because I've just searched on his thing.
Mm.
But there was that. This is even worse actually than what my example was. So I found
Okay,
it. It was
okay.
March 21st, 2023. So I won't say which one of the writers it was. Read it, you'll find it. Oh, I thought this was so bad. So it says it's a picture in Tesco's of an aisle with like, I don't know, alcohol and all sorts of bits and pieces, and it's like a Passover banner. Passover being the Jewish celebration. Okay. The tweet has got that picture and it says, Ramadan is due to start in 1 day, but Tesco, Colney Hatch's main display is promoting Passover, which starts on April 5th. This area has lots of Muslims and lots of Jews too. It would be nice if Tesco could be equally considerate to both. And I saw that and I was like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to us? Like, it doesn't, Tesco can do what it
That's kind
wants.
of puzzling.
You're setting us up to fail. You're like, oh no, we demand Tesco's celebrate Ramadan with us. We demand this.
That's it sounds like to me, like that's like inferiority complex, which makes you very easy to trigger. So it's like because you feel inferior subconsciously, any little thing will make you be like, oh, but we should be equal to the Jews. We should get this like these people. We should get that. It's like, yeah, it's too much in my
Yeah, I
opinion
think
for
this is
sure.
it. And someone obviously wrote underneath, like lots of comments. One here says, if they commercialize Ramadan, you complain. If they don't commercialize Ramadan, you still complain. Like they could go full out all
Mm.
Ramadan. It's like, oh, they're cashing in on Muslims. They were just like a cash cow. And then
Yeah,
other
yeah.
than that, and it's like, well, we're in England. Like they don't have to do any of that. Even if it is a Muslim, like I've been to like Tesco's in Leighton, where my wife used to live. Um, that's completely different, kettle of fish to Tesco's down here in Brighton where I go. And it's like completely different staff, completely different customers, completely different aisles. Yes, they do a lot of catering to the audience because of cash, because they're going to sell what they sell. But this tweet and the sentiment behind it and tweets like it, where it's like, how far is too far? I'm glad I found it, by the way. But how far is too far? It's like, whoa, what are we doing? Because that mentality, and I'll use that mentality also exists with diaspora that do go back home or other countries. This expectation and entitlement and this haughtiness. And look, I'm from England. I've got this red passport, or whatever. You should sort this out for me. You should. It's like it's bad. It's something that we've taken from this supremacy, white supremacy, colonial
Mm.
narrative and this silver tongue that the colonizer teaches us, and we take it back home. We do. you know
Yeah.
we expect more because we come from such a such place. We think we're better because we've got a bit of financial leverage over the normal population. And then if it's used against us, let's say you go to Maghreb or Algeria or whatever, and the guy selling souvenirs charges you a bit more because you're not from here, you say, no, old bled, what are you talking about? Like, my dad used to say that all the time. He's like, don't give me tourist prices, you know what I mean? It's like, well, you can't win.
Yeah.
1 minute you want to lean on your foreign leverage or whatever, and another time you want to say, no, I'm from here. It's like you pick it
Mm.
up and drop it whenever it suits you. And it's the same in England. We pick up our, oh no, I'm a minority. You need to give me, and we drop it. And that leads into something else I'll talk to you in a little bit. But what do you think about this then? What do you think about this make Ramadan
I think it's
adverts?
normal. It's normal to try and have your cake and eat it. I think
Yeah.
that's normal, right? But I think the more your taqwa and stuff, the more you'll like be able to draw the line and be a bit gracious about it and stuff like that.
Mm.
I've noticed that I've noticed that. You know what it is, bro? So I've lived in the UAE with, I've met a lot of people with Western passports in the UAE. I've met a lot of people with Western passports in Turkey, and generally, bro, they find it hard to integrate. And the people that find it the hardest to integrate, or not to integrate, I just mean to get on with stuff, you know what I mean, without complaining too much, and to adapt, to a different way of being. It's the people who've lived their whole life in the West and then they've moved, right? And the people who adapt the best are people who have lived in other countries, cultures, whatever, and then they've come here, even though they might also have the same passport. So I think, you learn over time and stuff, but some people, it's like kind of like what I'm saying about empathy. They just cannot get their head around this one simple fact. It's a very simple fact, but it's golden, which is not everyone is like you. Not everyone has to be like you. Not everyone thinks like you. Not everyone has the same priorities as you. And maybe just because they're not the same as you, maybe that doesn't make them worse. Maybe it just makes them different. Right? And I'll give you a real example. And this is kind of tooting my own horn or whatever, but so what? Right? So I came here and it did hit me, to be honest, bro. When I came to Turkey, it hit me how people are a bit grumpy. People are a bit stone-faced. People, to me, it's rude, bro. People are rude. 1-2 years later, bro, I adapted. What that means is that now when someone gives me a smile, I'm over the moon. Because my standard went from whatever you want to call it, the Arab standard or the British politeness standard, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
My standard went from that. Because I'm in a new environment, a new place, I stopped expecting what that country gives me, and I started expecting what's normal here.
Yeah.
And because I looked at like Turks interacting with each other, neither is smiling, neither is being overly nicey, and they're fine with it. That's how they interact. They're not mistreating me. That's how they are genuinely. So I adapted. I'm like, oh, that's the new norm. Let me update my software. Right. Let me get the new software for Turkey. The Turkish software is no one's going to be smiley with you, right? A nice thing they'll say is like good day. That's nice. Okay, if they say good day, you're good, bro. If they smile, it's a time to celebrate.
Yeah.
So I changed what I expect. And I'm happy. I'm still here 4 or 5 years later. But the people who are like, they're so rude. They did this. They did that. They're like this. They're like those people. They're gone, bro. They can't hack it simply because they couldn't accept someone else is different to you. And you could say, maybe I was. No, actually, we could say this. We could say, well, the Prophet ﷺ wasn't like that. He wasn't like stone face and never smiling and this and that. Yeah, but. Go to, let's say, the people the closest to how the Prophet in interactions specifically, maybe I don't know, Arabs in general, whatever. You could pick an Arab. Do they have all the other good things of the Prophet or they mainly have the good interaction? It's mostly that interaction stuff, the generosity. They have that stuff that's good. Other things of the Sunnah they might be missing. So just because you notice something that one people are missing with regards to the Sunnah, it doesn't mean they don't have other things that they're really strong at when it comes to the Sunnah, when it comes to ethic. So it's just the ability, bro, to like realize you the way you are, what you're used to, it doesn't define what's good and bad. That's just your experience. And if you want to leave your country because you see that it's better for you and your family to be in another country, well, what comes with the package, it's a whole package. What comes with it is empathy, having to empathize, having to understand where other people are coming from.
Definitely. I think also, like, if you truly are someone who feels like you don't have a home, as many people do from our kind of, community that we're talking about here, is then just behave like a good guest wherever you are. And I think that's the key. It's like, okay, you're not from here, then don't have this like, oh, I don't care what happens and I don't care about this place or whatever. If you went into my home as a guest, be gracious. Exactly. If I visited your home, then I would ask before I do stuff. I would be polite. But this element of just like entitlement and this like, well, I don't care, and I'm going to, because you don't respect the native population and you're here for your own personal gain, then you don't care what happens in the long run. And that has a ripple effect. Yeah, exactly. And it has a ripple effect on everyone who does see it as a place they want to reside in for the long term. And it's a simple, it stretches far and wide, from inconsiderate drivers to obviously littering and all that sort of stuff, to just actual cheating systems and stuff that's out there, cheating, benefit cheating, and even stealing and all that. Like there was an article today actually. I don't know how relevant it is. I came across it of like an influencer that was raising money for charity, and he just ended up spending all the money on himself and his own stuff and whatever. And this was in Germany, I think it was. But stuff like that notion of like, oh, I can because it's a system and I'll just do whatever I want and then I'll disappear and run off. Like, it's almost like the element where there was an extreme side of it where people would say, oh, this is Dar al-Harb technically, so I'm not going to stop at the red light. Like someone said that to me once. I was like, okay, great. Fascinating. There's also this thing, this is really contentious. I wasn't sure whether to mention it, but I'm going to mention it anyway. There's this famous clip that goes around from the UAE, right? I can't remember his name. It's like some sort of guy, one of the guys. And he says, about extremism. You've probably come across it before. He says, he's talking to a Western audience. And he goes, he's obviously trying to pander to them, but he's in Emirati. And he's saying, extremism, you think extremism and terrorism and all this stuff is going to come from us in the Middle East, but actually it's going to come from, he's pointing at the diaspora.
Okay, I know what.
I've seen the clip, yeah?
Clip you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah. And he's painting that as don't worry about us. We're not, we're the peace-loving Middle Easterns, whatever. And he's pointing the finger at the diaspora and saying, that's where it's going to come from. You should keep your eyes on them. Now, I wanted to break that down a bit because it's not that I want to say he's right. I don't want to say that. I'm not going to say that. But what I am going to say is that when you have a population that is detached like that is detached and doesn't have any roots or grounding in a society, is a transient kind of, they do become suspect. They do become suspect to both. That's why we're an easy scapegoat in that regard, but we're also easily influenced. If you look at these groups like Daesh and whatever, the people they kind of recruited, they were recruiting really the outcasts of society. They were recruiting the people that didn't care about where they lived. They thought where they lived was Dar al-Harb or whatever, and they're going to conduct, malicious and violent attacks on these people because they don't care about where they live. They see where they live as hostile nation. They're here through circumstance, and they're essentially mentally and physically at war with the nation. And it's the same.
Interesting to add just to that point as well. I believe the second largest nationality in Daesh was from what country? Do you know?
I was going to put my finger up like it's me, but it's Tunisia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's something going on with that as well, isn't it?
I have a theory of that. Yeah, I have a theory of that, and I think it's big. I'll mention my theory quickly, and I don't know, but it's just my theory is that if you've got a repressed nation, Islamically repressed, wasn't able to have knowledge for a long time, suddenly it burst open. There was freedom of movement, and they've got the euphoria of having that freedom, like the revolution, etc., but not the knowledge. 50 years without Islamic institutions teaching you, not the knowledge to engage in that. So any silver tongue saying jihad, they're gone because that's what they think is happening. So I think that...
Well, you see the parallel between that and the West, for example, as well.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, this is it. Because you haven't got grounded institutions, grounded understanding of Islam that actually stretch... Like, you can't sit at the feet of the scholars because there aren't. I'm not saying there's not scholars, but you understand what I'm trying to say. Like institutions are...
Well, the roots are not as deep.
Exactly. You might have
like
some...
Like Al-Azhar, which is hundreds of years old.
Exactly. And that disrespect for those that do seek to engage. And I think that's another thing I wanted to mention. We said earlier that there's no real precedent for those who want to engage into the community and become I'll give you an example.
Mm.
Omar Suleiman, okay? Fascinating case study in a leader of a Muslim community that is navigating waters that maybe the last person, I think, to famously tread those waters, in my opinion, I could be wrong, is like Malcolm X, but he didn't live long enough to see the fruits of that, that
Mm.
treading. He was a public figure that was so well known in activism and Muslim,
Yeah.
but cut short. And it would have been fascinating to see when he became a true Muslim and left the Nation of Islam, how far that
Mm.
activism would have taken him in America when he'd already made so much ground. Now, Omar Suleiman
Yeah.
is clearly well known in America, well known for his activism as well, and especially in the Palestinian issue, but also in other issues that arise in America. Anti-immigration issues,
Mm.
deportation stuff with ICE, lots of stuff I've seen him. He also becomes the target of criticism for a lot of armchair critics who I would class as these broken off sections of non-integrating Muslims in America, or whatever you want to call it, who haven't done the work to try and develop or lead communities that have decided to really put their roots in America. And I think that's an interesting thing to talk about. There's going to be people that say, okay, this is England, this is America, this is where we are. There is no home for us elsewhere. We're not going back to those who haven't got like citizenship elsewhere. We're not going back to Pakistan. We're not going back to North Africa. Some say we're not even going back to Palestine because we can't. This is it for us, generations and generations. So they try and become American Muslims, or Muslim Americans, and they try and carve a culture for themselves there that might not look like a cookie cutter, Saudi or Pakistani or Turkish, whatever culture that may be
Well, it's
imported.
literally a new path.
It's a new path, because it doesn't look recognizable to these types. And it also doesn't, and a lot of these types that don't want to integrate, if they have no culture from back home, then their vision of Islam is a historical one, not a current day one. They live in
It's either historical or it's a bid'ah. It's a new thing that they've romanticized or made up or imagined.
Yeah, it's this utopian understanding of what the past might have looked like, and very much quoting, in this caliphate and in that caliphate, and this happened and that happened. This is how we should be, and this is what we should establish. But the real work is looking after the communities. And I'll give you an example, going back to Omar Suleiman versus his detractors. I won't name his detractors in this field. He's a leader of a community, he's an imam of a masjid, and he's led communities in many settings. Whether you agree with some of the stuff he's done or not, that's not what I'm discussing here. It's just that effort of trying to lead in a society that is precarious. A wrong move could damage the entire community or the entire Muslim population in the US, really. Someone of that stature. The others who distract have never been in a position where they lead a real community. They lead, people online, a community online, a Discord server, a Telegram channel, a WhatsApp group. But to actually say, I have led a masjid, I've been an imam of a masjid, I've led this community, I've navigated the complexities of having to, we need insurance for the masjid, or we need to accept this mayor coming in and he wants to do a talk, and how can we weigh it up? And, but he agrees with this and he's a Zionist. It's that constant balancing act of trying to engage for the benefit of the community, to gain the rights of the... Anyway, it's easy to sit there.
This is exactly parallel with... So in this scenario, the analogy to that is like Omar Suleiman is a country, is a nation state.
Yeah.
And the detractors are the proxy groups or something.
Yeah.
The proxy groups play by different rules to the nation state.
Yeah.
Even though they might be acting on behalf of the agenda of the nation state, but they're not a nation state. They don't have to play by UN rules and these rules and that rules. They do little things and they say, we don't know who these guys are. They're just ragtag people.
Yeah.
Whereas the nation state, they have to answer for everything they do in an official way. They've also got millions, tens of millions of people in their, borders. They've got an economy to worry about and all that. But the group, it doesn't have that to worry about.
Yeah.
So that's why that's why countries have proxies, because it allows them the flexibility
Mm-hmm.
to do things they couldn't do as a nation state.
Mm-hmm.
So someone was just explaining this to me, and I thought it was quite interesting.
Yeah.
And it's exactly, I think, the same dynamic as what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's fascinating actually to think about, because look, those who are the proponents against Islam and against Muslims, and the ones who are scapegoating Muslims, they're not pointing at almost a man 90% of the time, or his likes. They're trying to make an effort, a positive effort in communities. They're pointing at these little groups. They're taking clips from those little groups because they're so brave and they can say stuff publicly on YouTube or whatever that you can't say a minbar, or you can't necessarily. It's not wise to say. Or might not even be true. They're trying to be inflammatory for the same reason. And they're using them as an example and as a reason to do away with this effort, and this, look, when you have these, I don't know what you want to call them, let's call them an armchair whatevers. When you have them saying we're going to take over, Islam is going to every home and we're going to take over this country. And, as much as there might be some truth in that and some discourse with that hadith about Islam entering every home in the world, it's inflammatory and you're doing it to goad a reaction, and you position yourself almost like you're just cocky and you have no fear, and I only fear Allah and I'll say whatever I want because you only care about yourself and the fact that you can say that, as opposed to the ripple effects it has on, I don't know, my wife walking down the street in niqab, and what someone who's just seen that video wants to do to my wife when she's on her own, and you're here to take over, stuff like that, putting Muslims at unnecessary risk by goading a population as if you've got this superiority complex over everyone, which isn't really Islamic. We've come to be a mercy on the people, Islam and Muslims. We're continuing the message of the Prophet ﷺ, and to be a mercy on those that we touch, those around us. We're not here to be antagonistic, and we should try our best not to be, wherever we are, whether that's here or back in the Muslim world, really and truthfully. Because even in the Muslim world, if we're going to come back or we're going to visit or we're going to benefit the ummah, as we always talk about, we're trying to benefit this ummah that we're living amongst, not the ummah in your head that, passed away in the last caliphate or whatever it was beforehand, because we need to identify with Muslims that are everywhere. We need to identify with the Muslims that might not be visibly got the beard and the thobe, and you don't see them in the masjid or whatever, but they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This superiority complex just has to go. We have to eradicate it within ourselves. And it's even worse when it's sprinkled with that red passport European element of it as well. I can go wherever I want, and I can. Oh, it's horrible when it's got that.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. That you labeled some of these people as not integrating, but I think they might have integrated even more than Omar Suleiman, for example.
Yeah. I know what you mean, yeah.
Because what is one of the characteristics of these people or their behavior is that they're mostly focused on themselves, right? Like they could make certain statements and it doesn't affect them negatively, so they do it. It might affect other people negatively, but they're not so much focused on that, you know what I mean? And that is selfish, but another way of describing it is individualistic. And that's very well integrated then, right? Because the Western thought, what do you call it? The Enlightenment and all that, and these ideas of liberalism and stuff, which is supposed to define what being a Westerner is all about. Well, that's all about personal liberty, freedom to do what I want and follow my desires. So that's quite a Western thing. So these people, you could say, they've integrated actually the most. They've integrated so much that they're acting in a wonderfully liberal, selfish way. I don't want to paint them all like that, because there's nuances to it.
Course,
but that's an interesting point to make, isn't it? Or an observation. The same goes for, going back to the UK. The same goes for those who act un-Islamically and give a bad name to Muslims because of that. Well, maybe they've integrated very well as well. They've integrated so well that they want to sell drugs like people in the UK sell drugs. They wouldn't be selling drugs maybe if they're wherever their parents came from, their grandparents. But they come to the UK, they want to smoke like British people, sell drugs like British people, do this but Of course, they have a baggage of the immigrant as well. But the point is, some of these people who are bad examples of Muslims and bad examples of Western citizens or whatever, they've integrated the most in that sense, although they might not realize it.
You know, it's a shame that we don't have. I mean, I'm locked away behind the English language, and I need to read more Arabic literature. But I'm sure a lot of these accounts were lost in history in relation to the same phenomenon that we're seeing now. How did that play out in earlier Muslim nations when they started being exposed to Muslims? You know, like, I suppose, North Africa or Malaysia or Indonesia. These kind of, when they first had communities of Muslims come in and giving dawah, because a lot of the excuse that people use here is like, well, I'm here to give dawah. But it's only the verbal dawah that they're focused on, not necessarily the behavioral dawah, that I'm going to look after my community, that I'm going to build this place up dawah. Everything I touch should benefit from my presence kind of dawah. It'd be interesting to see if this stuff has been replicated, if this notion has been replicated. Were Muslims seen as outsiders and pushed away? I'd argue not, because clearly the results speak for themselves. And maybe this is just kind of a new phenomenon that we're seeing now, where we have this kind of, especially with these types that we're talking about, this purist kind of, everything has to be this black and white. There's a black and white precedent to what I'm trying to criticize others regarding, right? When actually, like we said earlier, they're carving new ground here. This is new, you know. Yeah. Turkey today, there was a Turkey before where there wasn't no Islam, and someone had to carve that. And maybe there was armchair critics from, you know, Medina that looked at that and said, "Oh, what are you doing?" You know what I mean?
Still exists today,
you know. And also, what's the irony is, a lot of these guys are benefiting from the effort that was made previously. You know, like the subcontinent diaspora that came to the UK and established and built masajid and stuff. They may have had to crack a few eggs to make an omelette, really and truthfully. And the message you're praying in now, well, how would have that been established if we couldn't do X, Y, Z? Or so it's the purest ideological kind of, like, I get it, I respect it, I respect the effort to be 100%, but to then point the finger at someone and be like, haha, what's he doing? Look, everybody watch this reaction video I'm about to do on this guy here that's trying to carve a path for his community in the West. How stupid. Yeah. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah. You know, there are certain decisions I've seen, you know, decision makers in Muslim countries make. And I'm like, I mean, there's only a few that I would that I have the assumption that they have a good intention, not just for the citizens of their country, but for the ummah as a whole.
Okay.
So when I have that assumption of them, but then I see them do something that on the surface is wrong, you know, I'm like, that thing they're doing, like, they're living in a world of compromises, right? They're not living in a world of, well, that's the right thing to do, or that's the sunnah, let's do it, right? They often are making choices between 2-3 bad choices. None of them are perfect. So they're choosing one. Now, they're choosing one, maybe they're saying to themselves, I don't know how they could get around this in their head. It's very difficult. But they were like, I know there's a compromise in that, but I think overall it's the better choice or whatever, right? But the truth is, bro, the scary thing for them and for us just in general, Yani, is that they will never know if Allah would, like, forgive them for that compromise they made, and Allah would really accept the sincerity they had, right? Because the only way you're getting away from that sin, like, let's say this decision includes a sin.
Yeah.
It might even include a big sin. But you're like, well, I'm faced with 3 bad decisions, and I think this is better for the overall goal and blah, blah, blah. I'm doing it. The only way Allah might forgive you for that is if you're so sincere in that. And how do you measure your sincerity in this life? Like, you can't. So the only way that person would know that they've actually justified that decision is Yawm al-Qiyamah.
Yeah.
Like, literally.
Yeah, of course. You know, that reminds me.
That.
Go on.
Yeah.
No, go for it.
I mean, that applies to the community leaders, not just country leaders. It applies in so many places.
Yeah.
That's why I'm bringing it up, because I thought about it on that level, or like the macro level, the country level, but it applies everywhere. But it also like the people that are pointing out that decision they made, it's wrong Islamically. That's also important, like it's important that we remember what's right and wrong from the books, if you like, if you want to call it that. And you always kind of have those people calling people to the utopian way of doing things.
Of course, yeah.
Yes. I guess it just you need to know what's right and wrong, and you also need to have empathy or a bit of nuance as well.
Yeah.
And then you'll be in a good place.
You touch on many things there, actually. And there's a lot we can borrow from those ideas of leadership in general. Like there's a video, History UN. We had
Historian.
I've been on a craze. I'm like this close to getting the membership. I listened to all the videos of the gym, and he's posting loads, and my algorithm now is being attuned. But there was a video put out recently called Philosopher King, or Why, I can't remember what the title was. It was either called The Philosopher King or Why Muslims Hate Their Rulers, or something along those lines. But it was borrowing from I think it was Plato's Philosopher King, where it's like he was talking about how it's so rare in history to have this leader that is so theologically driven and trying to aspire for all these ideals as a purist. When the norm really is actually, throughout history, is actually leaders are generally more prone to corruption, more prone to self-interest, etc., etc., etc. But forget leaders of states at the moment. I just want to use that element for leaders of communities, because I think we want to keep the conversation down there. You spoke about the intentions, and you spoke about the necessity for these critics to exist, which I think there is an element. But the link here is, no one's going to say these community leaders aren't Muslim. We're not going that far, as opposed to the rulers and whatever. That's a different discussion. But look how the Prophet ﷺ speaks about advising the ruler, and we'll take that as a community leader. Should we, as Muslims, pull these community leaders to the side and be like, listen, you made this decision? Because I did this once in the masjid. Wallah, I remember thinking like, oh, this was weird. Why would you go to this thing? And I sat with the imam, and he explained the complexity of the situation he was in, that from the outside perspective, you'd have never considered. And I was like, right, fair play. But I could have gone on YouTube and made a video about him. I got some clicks. I really could have, There was an example that never really went viral, but I live in Brighton and a lot of people know that. The mayor of Brighton last year was a Muslim, okay? He's a practicing Muslim, very, 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 I'd say very British in his identity. Like he's from Bangladesh. He's still got a heavy accent. He still wears traditional clothing quite a lot. But bro, when I tell you, even when I was in the police, he used to invite me to all these community things he would do. He was like, he wasn't this isolationist in the sense that the effort and the community efforts he would do were for the Muslims. Oh, we need to build these community youth centers for the Muslims. Oh, it'd be great if we had a cafe for the Muslims. This kind of narrative.
Obviously, yeah.
He was like, I'm going to make Brighton safer. I want to make Brighton better for kids. I want to, there's this very notorious park in the center of town that is just notorious for drug dealing and he was like, he had this like dream of like renovating this park and eradicating the drug problem there. And look, we're a minority, very small population here. So he's clearly doing it for the benefit of just everyone he touches. He's got a restaurant, and you could look him up. You'll come across him. I know him quite well. Bro, he would just put on events and events and events and events all the time. He's just that kind of guy, active. He became the mayor last year. He's just stood down, I think, because that's what they do here. They don't really have much power. It's a symbolic thing in the UK. But people online, I saw little bits, a bubble of it. It was like, oh, Brighton's a gay capital of the UK, or Europe sometimes is even considered. And he's got a Muslim mayor. Yeah. And what's he gonna do when gay pride comes around? What's he gonna do? And I was like, I don't want to be in that guy's shoes, man. Because he's someone who I've seen the grassroots effort he's trying to do to benefit people. He's got the beard. Yeah. He prays in the masjid. He's there for every Eid. He's there for Jummah. But he's faced with this dilemma of carving out a path for his community, and also for being a role model of Islam. And you know what? I don't think at any of the events I went to that weren't Islamic oriented, has he ever stood up and said, "Oh, by the way, Islam demands this of me," and like trying to put he was doing it for the sake of Allah, as far as I can tell, right? As opposed to a very obvious marketing push for Islam, which, you know, I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'm just giving you the perspective here. So it's very easy for someone to look at that man and say, "Oh, he became the mayor of Brighton's gay capital." Like, oh, that's a bit weird. You know, rightfully, people might want to ask those questions. Versus, oh, what is the track record of this individual in terms of the benefit he's brought communities? What influence could he have? You know, so yeah, that was just interesting for me that there's people that exist like that, and you just don't know the whole picture.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the thing is, like, there's also times where someone might do something wrong and there's actually no need to criticize, or there's no need to go into it sometimes, right? Like, everyone makes their individual decisions, you know? If he felt like taking on that job, you know, and he thought that he could, you know, the good would outweigh the bad, he chose to do that. He has to stand in front of Allah for that. And that's the decision he made. You didn't make that decision. So you don't obviously agree it's worth it or whatever. Or maybe you didn't have the opportunity to do it. But yeah, I think that kind of might show, though. I know you said the mayor doesn't have much power, but like in a context like the UK, there might be a limit to places that you go. But there's still tons you could do. You know, there's still 10, 50 times more that you could do just in terms of volunteering. Bro, imagine every Muslim in the UK, one day a week, they volunteered to do something.
100%.
Oh, you know how many like thousands of man hours that is that you could contribute. You know? And it is like, you know, like you keep saying, it doesn't even have to be for Muslim what's it called, projects or whatever. It doesn't have to be filling up a lorry to send to Syria or whatever. It could literally be picking up litter, helping druggies with soup kitchen, whatever.
1,000%.
You know? Yeah. And by the way, if you do this, you do it for the sake of Allah, in terms of seeking the reward from Allah for helping people, right? You know, and being beneficial to people, and for da'wah, like have that intention as well. It doesn't mean you have to, like you said, be open about it, too open. The only reason being is because sometimes people might sense that it's not genuine. So make it be genuine, and then show that you're genuine as well. And you know, if the opportunity rises for more direct da'wah, then do it. But don't worry about that, because when you do these things, like, people will really see it. And I think people do see it, by the way, isn't it? Like, so many people do convert to Islam because, like we're saying, the most religious Muslims in the UK, in the US, people, I think, appreciate them. People like them. People see the benefit that comes from them. I want to touch on one thing, bro, which it's a bit of an epiphany for me, and it's a very important point. There is a difference between the experience, the issues, the advantages of immigrants and of Muslims. These two things, they're not synonymous. They're not the same. So, for example, I think in the past we did an episode talking about Muslims and business and investing and being gullible and being overly skeptical and those kind of things, right? So, is that a Muslim thing or an immigrant thing?
But the being skeptical and investing in,
for example, being skeptical when you're buying something or investing in something or whatever.
Oh, it's both, isn't it? Isn't it?
But how is it a Muslim thing? I wouldn't say it's a Muslim thing.
Right, like a uniquely Muslim thing, right? Yeah.
It's an immigrant thing,
right?
Yeah. Like, if you take immigrants, people from immigrant backgrounds, I don't mean you immigrated, I mean you're from that background, right? Immigrant background versus, you know, white English background. White English background are a bit more easygoing with buying stuff. They're a bit less skeptical, a bit whatever. So it's part of the culture of immigrants. So when people might see a Muslim acting a certain way, and they, for whatever reason, they say, "Oh, he's doing that because he's a Muslim." When he actually might be doing that because he's an immigrant. He has he's from that background. Right. Then another example, you might see, unfortunately, quite a large amount of Muslims in jails or Muslims dealing drugs or whatever. Where does that come from? Does that come from the fact they're Muslim? No way, right? That comes from the fact that they've been raised in certain areas of the city, mixing with certain people, coming from maybe their parents uneducated, poverty, this and that.
Yeah.
And so they end up often on the same track as other immigrants who are not Muslim,
Yeah, 100%.
like maybe Jamaicans or whatever. They end up in similar places a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Now you could say, yeah, but why didn't Islam fix that problem? Maybe their parents, a lot of their parents. I know my uncle who has six kids in France. A lot of them, bro, they're not that close to Islam. I know, bro, he's actually a very religious guy, mashallah, his wife as well. But he probably didn't realize I need to pump Islam into these kids if they're going to make it.
Yeah.
He didn't know that. A lot of parents didn't know that. Our parents maybe didn't even know that. So maybe that's why, and also Allah guides whoever he wills, right? But the point is that a lot of the stuff that people criticize Muslims for, it doesn't come from their Islam, but people choose to, probably because of media programming, people choose to link that bad thing they did with Islam.
Yeah.
Whereas really, a lot of these behaviors, they come from the experience of being an immigrant or coming from an immigrant background.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I think it's just a convenient label. Because Muslims encompass so many different cultures, and most of them are immigrants in the UK, then it's easier to single out this label instead of saying, because this would be way more inflammatory, saying, oh, those black foreigners or those Pakistani foreigners, which sometimes even say that, but saying Muslims is like, it's kind of PC. It's more politically correct to just point the finger at those guys, because you've got a president of the years and years of war and terror and Islamophobia and all that stuff that you can group up with that. Not only are they taking over, but they're also a threat. Look what they did before, kind of thing. All right. And it's just very convenient in that regard. Very convenient.
Yeah.
One final kind of, well, there's loads. We can go forever, lots of this stuff, because so much to talk about. But one thing I wanted to ask you, okay, is you're the other guy to ask, because you think deeper than I do about these things. Maybe people have got a point, playing devil's advocate again. Maybe like because of the Quranic idea of like being ghuraba in this dunya, and actually we are for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is our final abode. And this live in this world as if you're a traveler. Are we then right to feel like that? Like the people that aren't really, that are more transient, that are more like, oh, I don't care about this place and I don't care about that place. I don't really have a home, and I just kind of get on by. Is that Quranic in that regard? Is that a misapplication of Quran and Sunnah, or is it a legitimate feeling to have? Like, oh, I don't want to set roots. At the same time, you never forget that the Prophet ﷺ telling us to plant a seed, even if the Qiyamah is upon us, and you have a seed in your hand to benefit the people. Plant. It's like this balancing act between living life as a traveler, but also be of benefit to the people, even if you're about to.
Yeah.
And maybe people are leaning on one more than the other and not balancing it. What do you think?
I was speaking to a brother recently who's been here about 4.5 years. He's from America, and he went to renew his residency and he got rejected. So he's got 10 days to leave the country after having been here for 4.5 years.
Oof.
Furniture, family, kids, this,
10
that,
days.
10 days, go. Right? I was talking to him, and I said, you know what? I know it might be difficult for the family and stuff, but at least for us, we need to live by that. We need to live by this motto, that you mentioned, that we're travelers, and Allah calls Jannah Darul Qarar, the place where you settle, the place where you stay forever. And in this world, we're not to settle. But even in these countries, we're not to settle, it seems, right? When you get 10 days to leave. But of course, I was only saying that to him because of the circumstances that he was in the US, I think, his whole life. Now he's been here 4 years. Now he's not going back to the US. He's going to yet another place. And I was saying that to him because, yeah, definitely he can take solace in that as somebody who's moving around.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, though, that someone who's very stable in a country that I should say, look, bro, Jannah's Darul Qarar, not here. You need a little bit of instability. Why don't you roll the dice and see where you're going to move to for the sake of it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think when you are in a circumstance of instability, you should check your heart, and you should, program in your heart that don't seek stability too much, because this life is not for stability.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But if you happen to have stability, alhamdulillah, like, of course, every human, I think, seeks that. I think definitely, women, especially women who have mothers and stuff, they seek stability a lot. They want that nest that they can fortify and, raise their kids in a stable, good environment. I think if we look at the science of raising kids with instability versus stability, then stability will be much better for them, etc. That's normal. It's one of those things, if it happens that you need to go and do jihad, you go and do jihad. There's a reward for you in jihad, but you might lose a limb, you might lose your life. Now it's hated to you, as Allah says in the Quran, right? But if you're in the circumstance, you don't think about losing the limb, you think about Jannah.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
So the same goes for this. When you're in a situation of instability, then you've got to remember that this life is not for stability. So you should just take the opportunity that Allah has given you to mold your heart to what is most pleasing to Him.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And look, I don't think I would have, in another life, if I'd never left Tunisia, Allah knows best if I would ever start practicing. It's that pushback and that disenfranchisement and that feeling of loss that pushed me, that edged me towards trying to find an identity that became, practice Islam. Oh, there's an identity here, and latch onto that. And that became my home, And I always talk about that. That's always my story of how I became practicing. My evolution, though, maybe my political persuasion or whatever you want to call it. What that first did, practicing Islam and stuff here in the UK and finding that here, did give me, admittedly, a superiority complex when I went to Tunisia. Oh, it's got a typical no one practices here. Oh, it's a liberal place. Oh, I'm better than everyone. Oh, look, combined with the whole, I'm a Westerner and I've actually got this passport and I can do what I want. And I really had to work on that, bro. And sometimes maybe I've worked on it too much, and maybe I've gone too far the other direction in some situations, But, if I had to pick where I'd want to fall, but I want to fall on the benefit of the wider ummah and have good thoughts and optimism of the wider ummah, then become an eternal pessimist and live in this purist isolationist bubble that no one can do any good, and there's no good anywhere in the world but in my own sphere of influence, and I think that was also an evolution, and I think there's a lot of Muslims that find that out the hard way, that grow up practicing in the West, them being in the West or being strangers or being distant, or you see a lot of it. Actually, you see a lot of even now I go to the masjid here. There's a lot of guys, North African guys, that are new. They're like my dad, but they're new. They're like 17, 18-year-olds have just come over here to work and whatever. Some have papers, some don't. But they're in the masjid, and they wouldn't have been in the masjid in Tunisia or Libya or Algeria. Like they have a story that they've come here and they felt this pushback and they want to latch onto anything that can remind them of home or deen or Islam. Obviously, some go really far off the track and they use it as an opportunity. Oh, the freedom is out here. I can do whatever I want. But some actually, like I said, they feel like, I need something that can ground me because I feel so lost here. And the masjid is where they find it, and the community there is where they find it, and they find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala there. And Allah would send a Muslim in Tunisia or Algeria or Morocco or Yemen or wherever. He would send them all the way to Bilad al-Kuffar for them to be guided over there. Ironically, even though, and obviously the norm is to not leave a Muslim land for the risk of losing Islam. But it's fascinating when you think about it. It's fascinating when you think about
Absolutely. Yeah. Bro, I wanted to make sure we cover this point.
Go for it.
Because I've been thinking about, like I said last episode, there's a lot of instability right now in Turkey. And it makes one think about,
The future.
you know, the future, where they would live. But specifically, like, for my kids, because like we already talked about, like, I'm third culture kid, I'm confused. I've actually accepted a while ago that, because I've experienced it now, you know what I mean? So I've been in the UAE where that's all I knew. Then I went UK. I'm like, damn, I'm different to these people. By the way, that's what I was going to say. You know, British people feel like, oh, we're not quite British. Bro, British Muslims are very British. Yeah, they don't realize it. But as an outsider, they're very British.
Okay.
But you know, like this, was it? I think it was anthropology professor in uni. He's like, the goldfish doesn't know he's in the goldfish bowl.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
He has to come out to see.
Yeah,
right?
of course, yeah.
So I went UK. I'm like, damn, I'm quite different to this. I went Algeria. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty different to this. I went Turkey. I'm like, damn, pretty different to this. So, halas, I swallowed that red pill, if you like. But now I'm like, I have an opportunity here to fix that, quote unquote, fix that for my kids.
Yep.
Right. I have the opportunity, like Abu Khadija, who's been on the podcast, or Muhammad. What did he come on? He came on as Muhammad al-Masri.
Right.
He actually took the opportunity to go and raise his 3 daughters in Egypt, where he's from, like his parents are from, his wife is from.
Yeah.
He's raised them in Egypt, and from a young age as well. So you could say, quote unquote, he's fixed that problem. Because he's confused as well. But he has the opportunity to fix that. He's decided, like, that's what I'm doing.
Yep.
I have the opportunity to do that for my kids, you know. So that's a big question. Do I do that? Is that the actual best thing? And I was, of course, talking to my professor, my coach, my mentor, ChatGPT, and it was telling me that third culture kids have the best outcomes. There's no clear science or research showing that they do better if they go, quote unquote, back home, or if they keep country hopping their whole life. There's no clear data on that. But they said the best outcome that they have is when wherever they go, they create deep connections, deep relationships, and they commit to a country. It kind of doesn't matter where, in a way, right? And so no matter what it is for my kids, that is actually what will help them the most, it seems, is wherever they go, and help me the most as well. Wherever I go and wherever they go, if I commit to that place, if I invest in relationships in that place, if I mix with the general society in that place, if I learn the language of that place, that is when I'll have the biggest outcomes. And guess what? When you invest that much, you commit that much, do you think you're going to leave that place as easy as the other place? I guess not. So it becomes a kind of a virtuous cycle, you could say, or the opposite as well.
Yeah.
So that does make it sound like Algeria is a good option for us because of what I've just described. But it's a very big question, you know, it's a very big question because life in different countries all has different negatives and positives. And when you have different passports, you have a lot of choice. But I try to remind myself to make this decision for my akhirah and for my kids' akhirah, my family's akhirah. This is when you make the decision based on that, like the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims and the Muhajirin, they made that decision for the sake of Allah. They left everything behind in Mecca for the sake of Allah. They were not going to gain materially. So, you know, when you think of going to that country and you think, oh, it'll be cheaper or this or this or that, or it's a good place for holidays, or you can visit so many countries from that place. And you need to kind of put that a little bit to the side and first make a decision for my akhirah, for my personal ibadah and my impact of the ummah, whether that's local ummah, global ummah. If you make a decision based on that and you're sincere that that's the reason I'm making this choice, that's what Allah will put, you know, barakah. Who actually put riches, bro? What's it? من هاجر ومن يهاجر في سبيل الله يجد في الأرض مراغما كثيرا وسعة. Whoever does hijrah for the sake of Allah, then he'll find like dignity and he'll find basically dunya, riches, rizq, rather provision. Right? So it actually comes with the hijrah. So this is ultimately what me right now or whatever, but everyone, they need to be thinking. I'm in the UK. I'm kind of committed to the UK because I've maybe lived here my whole life. But if I double down and commit more and do more, is that good for my akhirah? Is that the best way I'll be able to contribute to the ummah and to the world and for my own ibadah, for my kids as well? that's what you really got to sincerely ask yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and the answer will probably be different for different people. So, yeah, this is what it I think comes down to
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah. I wonder how much that, like, not doing that impacts your even potential for sadaqah jariyah when you're just so transient. You know, you can't, if you're so transient and constantly moving and then you suddenly die, what physical entities have you left behind that will benefit people? We speak a lot about sadaqah jariyah online, and I make all these videos and I put all this digital stuff and this, but it's not real. It's not out there, and it's not something that people can. You know, even like these charities that we partake in, and I built this water well in Gambia, or I built this water well in India, whatever. It's like, okay, well, I don't maintain that. And I've done it once. It's like one and done and whatever. But if you have these people, like look at my ancestors and yours, even in Zaire, you know, they built this village. The whole village is my family. You know, we're all kind of. But my granddad, my great granddad, and like, to be able to say that and talk about that lineage, this is where they lived, and he built this tree. You see, like there's this fruit tree in my garden in Tunisia that was planted I think when I was born. And it's massive now. I can't remember what. I think it's an orange tree. I just look at that all the time. But when I'm there, I always think deeply about it because, like, I see it and I know it was planted by someone. It was a baby and it grew and it's there and we eat from it all the time. And I'll die one day, and my son might, and his son might, and his son. You know, if they look after it well enough. And then obviously my father obviously passing away and seeing everything that he's done in Tunisia and planted. And he loved gardening and all that stuff. So all the fruit trees, really, the banana tree that's so exotic and no one has it in the village. Well, just seeing that it's standing tall after him. If I was so transient, like if you planted a tree now so of course it will benefit, but is it looked after? Has it got that? Granddad Amin put this down in Istanbul. None of your lineage, unless they live there permanently, are going to see that and look after that and care for it the same way that they might in Zaire or wherever you decide to permanently reside. You know?
Yeah, a lot of community projects that really benefit people, they take 5-10 years to get off the ground 100%. And to really be established in a way where if the founder died, it would continue.
Yeah.
And so if you're not committed to a place, firstly, you wouldn't start that type of initiative anyway.
Yeah.
And secondly, you might not stick around enough to really give it firm roots so it sticks around beyond you. So 100%, bro. I was just thinking about the fact that I've got one of my sons has a British birth certificate. The other two kids have a Turkish one. My marriage certificate is from the UAE. So I've like got these connections to all these countries. Like literally, if I want a birth certificate, I'm gonna have to go literally to another country or this or that. It's crazy.
It's so precarious as well. And when things go wrong, bro, when like we're living in an relative comfort now, but hypothetically, when society breaks down and everything's, people are rushing to airports and whatever it might be. Like I think about this stuff, or you got these doomsday preppers and stuff. It's like when that paperwork isn't in order, it's like, oh my God, I have to leave my son behind or whatever it might be. Like, you don't understand the concept. So having that streamlined life, what you do and the way you've lived your life for so long, and other people like you that I speak to as well, that transient nature, I admire it, and I've admired it for a long time. And when having a wife and doing that with her, admirable, of course, still, although it gets into that kind of insecure territory. And, I can imagine my wife being very like, oh, how long? She loves to know what the plan is for 5 years in advance. Like, that's what women are like. They want that security and they want to know.
Yeah.
So like, are we going to have this place forever? Can I hang up plates on the walls? How long are we going to be here? Yeah. That kind of thing, like renting a place. Like, can I drill into can I change this thing? Can I make it home? No, exactly. You can't,
Exactly.
And the same with life. And then you've got kids and like you're thinking now, it's like, will they grow up with the nostalgia and that I've got for certain places when they're so transient? What are they missing out on without having those roots? Are they going to be normal functioning human beings? Do they care about their surroundings whatsoever? How can I instill in them benefiting the ummah and benefiting those around them when I never given a chance to even develop relationships because we're so transient? And obviously, in your situation, you are building like homeschooling, homeschooling. But in 10 years' time, those people that they've grown up with or homeschooled with, will they even know them anymore? Can they even say, oh, that's my neighbor from such and such, I used to go to
Story
school with
of my
him?
life. Yeah.
You know, that doesn't exist anymore. It's so transient that you've got no long-term relationships, no connections long-term, no roots, no heritage, no culture. And I've always thought about that in your shoes. And I've obviously subtly always said, oh, Zayd, why don't you go to Zayd? Right? But it's something to think about. And that's why, like, I've always said it about my family. And I know it's a long time coming. I talk about it all the time. But for Tunisia, I've had opportunities or discussions where people have said, oh, why don't you come and live in the UAE or Saudi or whatever? Like, why don't you go get a job there? It's never made sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me to split up my family more than it already is by like, oh, I've got this in Tunisia, some family in England, my mum's family in Morocco, my wife's family in Algeria, and I'm going to go and live in South. Oh, it's like, why would I do that to myself? You know, whilst me being in Tunisia consolidates a lot of my life so much because Algeria's across the border. Tunisia is where everyone's going to come back home to, and England is England or whatever. But like, I can that divide in your mind can then be shut. Like, you've got family in Algeria, bro.
Yeah.
You've got your dad, for example, that can come to Algeria and he's Algerian. That divide in your head that you used to feel, oh, you know, when your mother was sick, Allah yarhamha, well, do I go to England to see her? Does she come to Turkey to see me? Is Algeria even on the question, like cards?
100%. It consolidates a lot of stuff. Even my in-laws are Algerian.
Yeah,
my
100%.
Dad's Algerian, like 100%.
Yeah. And I think, you know, worth a try, and may Allah make it easy for you. Make it easy for everybody who's in that predicament. I think we're in the era of like, how long can I live on this side of the fence? Will my kids be able to navigate the society that doesn't really want them here as well as I have? Is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse? What can I do? And I think giving them that, you know, even if they have to wave the Algerian flag and sing the anthem, bro, it gives them a level of grounding.
No, that's not allowed.
Not allowed. One thing though, I don't want to carry on. Maybe we'll talk about it on a part 2 if we ever do it. National service, military service. You know,
I was going to bring that up. I thought it would go.
I was going to bring it up even about England, like, because England talks about that if there was a war to happen. None of these acts are going to join the army to fight for this country, bro. But then, like, in the Muslim world, like, Tunisia's they're trying to reimpose the military service now, which means if my kids were there, how would I navigate that? To be honest, the fine isn't that much. I could probably afford it, but I know other people can't. And do I dodge it and do I not? Same in Algeria. People escaped Algeria, came to the West because they were avoiding that. But what does that say about, are you doing that because of Islam? Or are you doing that because you don't care about the country? Like, where is your mind at with that? That's a story for another day. We could do a part 2 maybe if people will want that.
Inshallah, I think we've got enough ammunition for a second part, inshallah.
Yeah,
bro. Very interesting stuff. Inshallah, we benefited people, or, you know, just let people think of different angles to things. And I think overall, I would say the more you commit to a place, especially with a good intention, like for the sake of Allah, I think the better you'll be able to benefit. By the way, you might not benefit the most dunya-wise, comfort-wise. Yeah. If you want to benefit just dunya-wise, comfort-wise, and it's just like you and your wife, you don't have many kids, you don't have any kids. Like go UAE, make some money, live that life, then go here, then go. Like,
that is what it is. Yeah,
that's dunya though, right? But but if you want to chase the akhirah, then it's a bit of a different decision-making process.
100%.
Cool, man. Let us know what you think in Telegram, or I think we still do have an email address in the description.
I haven't had access to it in ages.
Inshallah, we can. We'll log in if you email us. We'll log in to check it, inshallah. And let us know what you think. Maybe you have your own unique experiences to share as well, and we could cover it next episode perhaps. Okay, subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.
Excellent. Let's try log in now.